Hey folks, I'm talking today about the December 14th solar eclipse, the big solar eclipse that we have in Scorpio that's coming up next week, or in a few days, actually, December 14th. I'm recording this on December 9th. And this is going to be a big shift, of course. You know, solar eclipses are big. I did a whole video on it that didn't have to do with world events and whatnot that you want to look at. I'm going to be talking about a few, just kind of state of the world right now, some U.S. political things, which of course a lot of people are still wondering about, and stuff like that in this web class here. But I also want to let people know that I have that if you haven't seen it yet, I have the 2021 forecast ready. Yay! Well, and you can register for it. I have a few days there. You can click that link, and when you go there to the forecast or to the page, you can just click register now here up at the top, and this will pop up, of course, and then you can find the day. Would be Friday, Saturday, or Sunday in the upcoming days. Or if you're seeing this later, you'll be able to get an instant replay and whatnot. So again, this is going to be excellent. 2021 is going to start. It's going to have some clunky moments in the beginning. It'll really start to improve as we go on. We'll start to work through some of the wrenching transformations that we're under, and we're under quite a few of them right now, as we can tell. It feels like things are so stuck, like, ugh. This is the nodal axis in those fixed signs, by the way, Rahu in Taurus, Ketu in Scorpio, and we're near this eclipse. So I'm going to talk about that here today. But you can see this kind of overview of the 2021 forecast. And again, this is all free to go ahead and register for. But finding light in the darkness, inspiration for your sign. I'm going to talk about the transit of Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter through Capricorn and Aquarius for all 12 signs. This is going to be really important because Jupiter is going to be very pivotal in 2021. It's going to start in Capricorn, and then it goes into Aquarius, and it comes back into Capricorn, into Aquarius again. So it goes back and forth. Jupiter is really the planet of our inspiration and purpose and literally finding light in the darkness. It might feel like there's some darkness, but we're going to find the light in the darkness, and I'm going to talk about that for all 12 signs. So not just in general, but for all 12 signs, including yours. Like if you're Scorpio, it'll affect you one way. If you're Pisces, it'll be your first and 10th house ruler going back and forth between the 11th and 12th house. All of that, those subtleties I'm going to talk about. We also have some very important Mercury retrograde cycles next year. Very powerful in some very important signs. There's a real pivotal Capricorn pileup early in the year. Of course, we also have eclipses. So all these things I'm going to go over. And again, all you need to do, I also have a video there that you can watch at the site if you want to hear me describe it a little bit more. But again, it's very easy. So check that out for sure. Again, it's all free. And this is what I like to do. So let me dive into the upcoming eclipse that we have. Here's the eclipse chart. And this is December 14th. This is about 9 a.m. San Diego time. See, it'll happen, right around that time, maybe about an hour early. We'll see it happening, around this time. And we have it because the sun and the moon are like at the same degree in the sky, and they're joined the node. So we have the eclipse when the sun is on the nodal axis, and then when we have the moon join the sun there or opposite, that's when we have the eclipse. That's why we had a lunar eclipse a couple weeks ago. And so now we have this solar eclipse on the 14th. It's in the nakshatra of Jyeshta. Now Jyeshta is ruled by Lord Indra, who was the king of the gods. And, the king was a great warrior. He was a great hero in the ancient times. Lord Krishna was a king, and Lord Rama were kings. There were royalty, and Indra in the Vedas was a king. He was and a heroic figure who would go to battle to defend the kingdom and to restore dharma and righteousness. we live in adharmic times now. Now, when we think of kings, many times we think of politicians and the trappings of power. Now, these are often things that are, corrupted. We're used to them being corrupt. We're used to them being exploited. And, people who have power over us, especially in governments, they abuse the power. We're just used to that. And and these are themes that are up right now for us as well. Of course, just to really get to the chase here, also about the election, that is still, at least to some people, it's still in the balance. It really hasn't been in the balance since we all knew that Biden had won. There's been a lot of kabuki theater, where lawsuits that don't make any sense being thrown out of court, this sort of public events masquerading as legal events, and baseless accusations in the public to foment grievance and get people worked up for fundraising and opportunism. That spectacle has been public, as most people who have been watching this thoughtfully without a lot of bias have also realized. In the courts, it's been a totally different thing. I think it's been close to 50 lawsuits totally thrown out of court because they have no merit. Yesterday, in fact, even the Supreme Court, just said no. There's just nothing to any of this, especially if you understand the way elections work, election laws. You have, district courts like in a county, like a county court, and then if you get a verdict you don't like, then you can appeal that to a state court, like a state Supreme Court. If you don't like that verdict, you can go up to an appellate court, or a circuit court. If you don't like that, you could go to the Supreme Court. This is how courts work. These lawsuits aren't even in the court system because they're getting thrown out. It's not even like there's verdicts. They're just getting dismissed. So anyway, the point is that one of the things that's very important about this December 14th date is it's literally the day that the Electoral College meets, and it's going to finish it. It's going to, it'll confirm, as we already know, because the safe harbor date for the Electoral College already passed. Safe harbor date is the day, it's a week before the Electoral College meets. The time for litigation and challenging the state's results have all been locked in. And so you really can't contest it after that. The Electoral College is locked in. The idea that there's still going to be these crazy things going to the Supreme Court and all this stuff, it's just not going to happen. The only thing left is going to be a sort of brute force coup. I'll talk about that a little bit later, about those crazy possibilities. But as it stands right now, what we'll see on the 14th, it's interesting how it coincides with that date. And it also coincides, we have Trump's chart here. Again, you can see his moon is at 28 degrees. And this eclipse is at 28 degrees, right on his debilitated moon in the 4th house. By the way, if you want to go back and look at I did a recent election video, a follow-up to my original election prediction, where I did predict Biden winning. In fact, I really nailed the prediction really well. I said it wouldn't be that close. It's not that close. Again, this is not close. Close was 2000, where we had one state and a few hundred votes. This is at least 3 or 4 states, tens of thousands of votes. His attempts to muck up in the courts and also muck up state electors and legislators and whatnot, it's not worked. It's not going to work. It's going to be locked in. And you can see with the transits here, this is the eclipse day here, and this is Trump's chart. Again, it's the 4th house from his ascendant, and it's getting hammered with this eclipse. His debilitated moon in the 4th house just getting decimated by this eclipse. Again, there are some people who thought, oh, well, he was born on the eclipses, so this makes him strong. Again, I've always begged to differ with that. Just because you're born on the eclipse doesn't mean it makes you strong. It also makes you weak. Again, I've never thought that was going to be the result. This shows, again, because it's a debilitated planet in the 4th house. 4th house is where you live. This looks like someone who might be getting ready to move. If I saw someone getting their debilitated moon in the 4th house eclipsed, just a very simple reading of that would be, are you having issues with your home? Are you getting flood damage, termite damage? Might you have to move? Are you thinking of moving to another country? Again, because for Leo, it's also the 12th house ruler in the 4th. So any moon in the 4th getting eclipsed, particularly if it's not in good dignity, it's not a beneficial placement here, particularly when you bring in rulerships and whatnot. Again, his sun is much different. The sun part of his born on the eclipse is very powerful. It forms a Raja Yoga. It's the first lord in the 10th, which itself is a Raja Yoga, and it's joined Rahu. So Rahu also is a Raja Yoga planet, join the sun. Very powerful Raja Yoga. First lord, or Rahu is in the 10th house with the first lord. Powerful Raja Yoga. The other end of the node, not even close. This is the 12th lord in the 4th, debilitated with Ketu. Not really delivering the goods. So again, we can see this this date of December 14th. They're gonna vote in the Electoral College, and that's it. It's already been locked in. The safe harbor day passed. All the lawsuits, he's had his time in court. None of it held up. Again, this, the public spectacle notwithstanding, we still live in a country of laws, and maybe you can get a lot of people worked up, but the courts aren't going to hear it. And again, we've also had so many losses and defeats in this regard. And I don't just mean in the states with recounts, but even his Attorney General, Bill Barr, came out and said, there's nothing here. The guy Krebs, who was the one who ran the election, also nothing. There is no widespread fraud here. Affidavits from people taking that into court when the lawyers full well know that it's not enough to overturn the results, and they never claim fraud in court, because if they claim fraud in court, they can get disbarred or they can get sanctioned. So these lawyers, even Rudy Giuliani and the others, they aren't saying when they get to court that it's fraud. Because when you're in court, it's like you're under oath. Now, he'll say it in front of cameras where there's no consequences, but in court, they've never alleged fraud. And they've not really proven a single instance of it. And again, these are coming from Republican judges that were appointed by Trump and George W. Bush, Republican governors. Kemp of Georgia is a massive Republican right-wing governor, but these people aren't going to break the law. There's no legal standing here. And again, Trump wanting these people to become criminals, to just say, well, I don't care if it's legal, just throw it out and do it. No, that's not going to happen. We do still have the rule of law. So again, not to keep going over and over with this, but I just want to bring that out because it is a big thing on people's minds. Again, this Electoral College Day on the 14th, this is one of the most evident things that will happen on this eclipse day. It's very obvious, and again, we can see here, even with Trump's chart, he's got this moon in Jeshta and Ketu, and this eclipse in Jeshta, Ketu, Mercury, Sun, and the moon. Again, Jeshta, all these planets in Jeshta, this is literally like the king, and it's the king getting pulled down. And you can see Jeshta in later, especially in the Puranic tales, in like the Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam and whatnot, Lord Indra became a kind of almost like a buffoonish, character. He was always, he was always getting into battles with Asuras and about to lose the kingdom. He was about to destroy the kingdom because he became very egoistic and willful in the later Indian tradition. Whereas again, back in the Vedas, which were more connected to the dharmic principles, at least the way the deities were portrayed back in like the Rig Veda and Yajur Veda and whatnot, Indra was very much like a benefic king, right? Who was protecting the kingdom. He was very heroic in battle. Later, because a lot of the Puranic texts are more about, telling stories about culture and politics and all the complexity of life, Indra became a kind of symbol of the abuse of power. I'm just saying this because this is a big theme for this eclipse. right now, is the whole look at the abuse of power in our world. Power, how it can be corrupted, how again, politics is big in this nakshatra. It's literally like people that have planets in Jeshta often have a lot of political, have a lot of political ambitions, because that's where you get a lot of power in the world, and not just, power to, control people, but also to make money and to be celebrity, or again, puffed up with pride and arrogance. What's the biggest thing you could do? Well, I'm the ruler of everybody. And again, it's where we can be seduced by power. And so again, we're seeing a big shift around this right now, right? Moving from the current occupant of the White House to the next sort of, the next wave, which is very different. Biden presents himself much differently. He has a black female vice president, a lot of diversity already in the cabinet picks. Again, but it's coming in the midst of this very transformative, somewhat chaotic time, and that's really shown. But I want you to keep that idea in mind about the theme of power and the theme of corruption of power, because again, there are people who, they look at Trump as being the virtuous one, of course, and Biden as being the Lord Indra who is abusing his power. So to just keep it, even like that. So again, this is and all the propaganda and all of the sort of, the power struggles that we have right now. This also includes things not just with, leaders, but other ways that power is used. For example, social media companies. We just saw today that Facebook might be broken up. I don't remember what the formal action was, but a bill or a law or a suit. I think it's a lawsuit against Facebook to perhaps break them up because they have a monopoly status, which I've long advocated that there needs to be some controls in these tech companies. Many companies are too big right now. Absolutely, Amazon and some of these gigantic companies that have absolute monopoly status. Something needs to be done about this. Again, we also need to reinstitute sane tax policy. Not going to get all over the board here with this now, but a lot of this is what's coming because with the transits, let me get off his chart. Right now, the context of all of this is this Saturn-Jupiter going through Capricorn. This is a big theme of 2020 for sure. And so this, let me just share this again. Again, this is a big theme for 2020, and I just want to share it here again because this is something that you really want to understand what's coming up. And again, I had the link. Let me share it again because, again, it's very important. This is free, and I do this every year. I do it for my benefit, but I also do it because, it's a great opportunity to show how astrology works. Again, last year in the 2020 forecast, it was like, I should bring the screen up again. I'll bring it up again. But it shows where, the whole first part of the year. In fact, let me just 20. Did I do it? Yeah. 2020 Vedic astrology. Let me see if that's it. Whatever. But you see that all the first part of the year, it's like, 7 out of the 10 factors, or 7 out of the 10 factors were all before like May. These were the things that affected. After that, it was only the eclipses and then Jupiter moving back, or another indicator, or no, it was this eclipse that showed the year. Notice how in 2020 everything was concentrated earlier in the year. Saturn went into Capricorn, then Mars and Jupiter went. It was like, whoa. And then Mars hangs out in Pisces and Aries for most of the year. Again, so it was very obvious that 2020 was going to be intense, especially around the first part of the year, and that's what happened. Again, here in 2021, we start off with the new moon in January, January 12th, that new moon in Sagittarius, very powerful. It's kind of like the beginning of the year. That's the way the Vedic people started the year. The new moon after the winter solstice was the beginning of the year. So this is like the beginning of the year for me, that new moon. And then a real, strong pileup of planets in Capricorn early February. It's really wild to see. Then we have a really strong exalted Venus here that happens, March to April. Then we have Jupiter in Aquarius, social inspiration and hope. Jupiter actually moves through Capricorn pretty quick, and where he's in the debilitated sign, where it shows sort of hunkering down, particularly with the COVID and whatnot. But then by the time we get into April and for the rest of, for most of the rest of the year, Jupiter is in Aquarius, much different. There's a lot of hope. It's going to be tough, but it's not going to be as intense as the last year. It'll have its moments, but not as much. Mercury retrograde is really strong next year. We have 2 big Mercury retrograde cycles where they hang out in good signs for the whole year, for like 3 months at a time. Again, almost 3 months at a time, Mercury is in Taurus and Gemini, and then almost 3 months at a time, it's in Libra and Virgo. That's almost half the year. Mercury is in really good signs. So that's really good. Then we have a total eclipse of stability, I'm calling it, the one in Taurus. We have another one, we have the Jupiter retrograde cycle. Then a total eclipse of the heart, I call it. And again, it's in a similar place that we have now. The sun and moon are then eclipsed in Jeshta again. And then the end of the year, we have Mars and Ketu in Scorpio, again, ending the year with that. So again, you'll want to see how this is going to play out and be ready for it. And again, I'm also going to talk about how for each of the 12 signs, the Jupiter transit is going to affect you, because it starts in Capricorn, then it goes into Aquarius, then it backs up, then it gets through, then it moves through again. So for each of the 12 signs, that's really important. So I'm really looking forward to that, to doing that reading, and it's something that can really help you. So again, back to this, we have this intense pileup, and so again, you're going to see a lot of these Scorpio and Jeshta themes. And again, Scorpio is about bringing out the, it's really kind of about transforming our insecurities and pain and poison into the great elixir, right? And again, we can see some real, we'll see some, we've already seen a lot of secrets come out, but we may see more, with certain figures and whatnot. There's so much going on that, again, it's kind of a sort of cheap way to say it, because we're already seeing a lot that's revealed. But especially going forward for the next few months, and again, this is happening right as we're changing governments as well. So again, I think there's going to be quite a bit of potential danger going forward as well, that I also wanted to mention, that because the last, especially politically, because the last legal struggles are being exhausted right now, and this eclipse is going to be like, bam, it's going to bring the hammer down on that. It's already locked in. Again, and the only way to do this legally at this point, which again, it was never really in question, because there were too many states that needed to be, too many votes that needed to be changed, frankly. As much as we would talk about fraud or something, this is just a concept. If you can prove fraud, you're going to have to go in and change votes at some point. And there was just no proof. All of those machines, they have a backup paper trail. Now they're talking about things like signature matching. It's a red herring, because they've already thrown the envelopes away. You can't do signature matching now, and they know it. It's all propaganda, and I don't want to get in the rabbit hole about it, but the point is that phase is now over. And that doesn't mean Trump is going to stop trying. He's going to try to keep corrupting electors. He's going to try to keep corrupting the Congress. You already have Congress people saying that they're going to contest the Electoral College. And by the way, let's not also forget, there's also the possibility of a brute force coup, where I have no doubt that if Trump thought that he could get generals to roll tanks down the street and side with him, he would do it. I'm not saying that even as if it would be surprising to you. It shouldn't be. He would do it. And I'm sure, I mean, he's made a lot of very scary moves at the Pentagon and trying, who knows why. Again, it's being very underreported, frankly. But these are some scary possibilities that are coming down the pike. And I'm saying they're on the table. I'm not saying they're going to work or succeed, but we may see some very dangerous, scary things coming at the rest of December and into next year. Again, to think that isn't trying to do this would be foolhardy. Look at all the moves that have happened at the Pentagon. First of all, he fired the defense secretary. The main thing that got him mad at the defense secretary, Esper, was last summer. Again, maybe you weren't watching, but I was watching, when he said, we're going to use military against the protests. And he staged that walking down the street, and the next day, and within a couple days after that, Mark Esper and Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and every military spokesman said, no, you're not. You're not going to do that. If you ask me to do that, I will decline the order. We're not bringing troops into the streets. And I said then, this is a dress rehearsal for now. Dress rehearsal for now. Because if he could get them to bring troops into the streets to stop protests, what happens if you lose an election and say, okay, I'm declaring martial law and generals clamp down and I'm throwing out the election. All these ideas that are being floated, this is no joke. This is not a joke. Again, Michael Flynn, who he just pardoned, he used to be the director of national intelligence, has come out and said Trump should declare martial law. This woman, Sidney Powell, said the same thing, this lawyer who released the Kraken. Apparently the Kraken couldn't spell, but again, when Attorney General Bill Barr came out and said there's no evidence of any of this fraud, again, that's the Attorney General saying this is not going to work. Not while I'm here. But again, Trump could fire Attorney General Bill Barr and he could put this Sidney Powell as Attorney General. And she might say, see all this stuff. There's some real scary things that could still happen. And I'm saying this is the stuff we need to watch for. The legal vote is over. He lost. Again, this was known a month ago, pretty much. But that doesn't mean that there aren't all kinds of things that you could just go for the coup, go for the steal. He's already tried to go for the steal. He's already tried to corrupt electors in Michigan and Pennsylvania, governors. He's leaning on everybody he can lean on to steal it. Literally, that's to break the law, to be a criminal. He's like, and he's furious at them that they won't, actually. He's literally like furious that they won't. This, again, you want to understand the reason Trump is so furious right now and the people following him is these people will not break the law for him. Again, and those who don't like me saying this, I don't really know what else to say, but that's the only way you can see it. We have laws. In the courts, it's not working. So he's like, well, who cares about the courts? Just steal it. Who cares about your state electors? Appoint other ones, dummy. Come on. No, it ain't good. So there's still a lot of ways that things could get monkeyed with, for sure. And expect this is going to happen. I'm making the prediction that it's not over. That part's not over. The legal part is clearly over. But there's still things that could happen. And again, this is the Indra, the king, the I won kind of thing. Okay? So, and again, this militarism of Jeshta is what we're going to see. And again, there are still some very dangerous things that could happen. And things could get very hairy. And again, they're not going to be legal. And I think the system will hold. I do not think there will be generals that will go along with this kind of thing. But especially legally and with how much in fealty the Republican Party is, that they would almost go along with anything that seems almost remotely plausible. By the way, I also just want to say this is very important to the prediction that I made about the election where I said it's not even going to be close. This is not close. Close would have been one state. If this would have been one state, let's say just Pennsylvania, one state, even if Biden would have won by a lot, even if Biden would have won, let's say Michigan by 125, 150,000 or whatever the heck it was, if it's one state, it could have been really hairy, because you could always maybe get one state, one group of electors in the state to just say, the hell with it, and then create a mess. But the reason none of this has worked now is that even if they were to do it, let's say in Michigan, that still wouldn't be enough. You would need Pennsylvania, you need Georgia, and you're not going to have people stick their neck out and break the law like that in Michigan, let's say, if it's still not going to decide the election. So the reason, like in my prediction, I said I don't think it's going to be close. And this is what I was talking about, was that it's going to be decisive enough that this aftermath would not work. And that's what I said in my prediction, that he's going to he'll try to steal it, but it's not going to work. So it's not over in that sense. And this is the diabolical part of this, or the stress on the election and stuff with this eclipse. So it's going to be, and again, it'll be another month, because, into January, it'll go, once the electors finally go to the Congress. I think it's January 6th, I think is the day. But so these possibilities are there with all of the shenanigans, and we could see some, literally, it's what you would just call a brute force coup, a legislative brute force coup. The legal one has not worked, and it won't work. But this other thing, again, I don't think it'll work, but we'll see it. Watch it. I'd be shocked if it didn't happen. And so I'd love to be pleasantly surprised. But besides that, again, we're shifting into a new relationship with power and with all the other things that are going on. We have, we're also really grappling again with the CoVid, at least culturally, and the fear and worry and, difficulty of that on our economy in the Western world, especially in the U.S. and in other Western countries, doubling down again and having to really work through that again. But again, this is really also being shown by this eclipse. But the other thing I want to let you know of is the vaccine is very Scorpio-like. Think about these energies as, not just simplistic, but literally it's like the venom, like the poison in the scorpion's tail. Think of it, the scorpion injects you, right? And then that poison goes in and becomes a, form of medicine. But any kinds of injections and needles and whatnot, they're very Mars and particularly Scorpio related. And this eclipse is happening right on the injection, right on the nakshatra of the injection, because this nakshatra of Jyeshta is literally in the tail of the scorpion. It's literally like the stinger. So you're seeing people across the globe getting stung, getting stuck, getting the spike, as they say in England, of the vaccine. I think we're going to have some complications with it that could lead to some paranoid responses. I think the fact that we're already seeing some of it, and things getting, and the kind of rushed nature of how in the U.S. Operation Warp Speed and even around the world trying to make sure that we get it out there. I think we could easily see some overreaction to some of the adverse symptoms from the vaccination and tend to get paranoid about it, for example. But in another sense, we need to be vigilant to that. But So, in a general sense, this is, definitely something that there's a lot circulating about the nature of the virus, the mRNA and whatnot, and there's been a lot of confusion and some propaganda, some disagreements about the nature of these mRNA viruses and how invasive they are to, rewriting, the DNA strand and whatnot. Again, I'm not going to delve into all of that, but we can see a lot of this with the Scorpio eclipse and how, vigilant we're going to be and how it could keep that sort of paranoia going. And I don't mean it as a derogatory way. Again, we're seeing also, again, huge here in the U.S. now. Again, I don't know about in other countries. I think there's also been a lot of protests against lockdowns again and what lockdowns mean, and the conspiratorial aspect of it, that it's part of the plan and the globalist plan that was decided years ago and whatnot. And again, it makes a lot of things difficult and brings the citizens into conflict with each other. And I think we're going to see quite a bit of that. There could be some real global problems and possibilities, especially global and social, as Mars starts to move. As Mars goes into Aries, especially, we'll see this around. This is like the day before Christmas again, and thereafter. This is where we could really start to see some of the more intense, maybe, I don't know if I would say that there's going to be violent protests, violent uprisings, but we could definitely see the month of, the end of December and into January, we could really start to see some real difficulties as Mars goes into Aries. Again, we also see that, by the middle of January, we have these planets up here, which I'm not going to talk that much about today. But the point is that the eclipse cycles tend to have a residue for a couple months. The way I look at it is that, again, people say for 6 months. I don't think it's 6 months. I think it's whichever node the sun is closest to, it has more of a foreshadowing or a lingering from the previous eclipse. So again, the nodes are here. As long as the sun, once the sun gets up around here, then the effects of this eclipse start to fade, and the effects of the upcoming eclipse start to be anticipated. And so I expect that the effects of this eclipse to be lingering through middle of February or so. Again, when the sun gets up around here, around early March or so, then we start to see it more anticipating the upcoming eclipse in Taurus. But for this, eclipse here that we have, it's mainly focused around the things I'm talking about. And again, this can't help but be a little bit political, because that's so much of our life, in the U.S. and even around the world, is revolving around a lot of political maneuverings. The world is kind of watching what's going on in the U.S. with with the election that won't end, and whether or not it's coming to an end. Well, again, definitely the legal cause is over. It's decided. And again, the Supreme Court showed very clearly, even yesterday, it just swatted that lawsuit away. The Supreme Court won't even take up, they don't just take up cases. It's not a court, it's an appellate court where you appeal a decision. They're not going to get involved with states. Again, so there's a thing with a Texas lawsuit. To think that that's going to go to the Supreme Court, again, it's a real beyond long shot. I mean, you never know until you know, but again, these things I don't see any of this working. again, I will say if I'm wrong, and again, there are people who have predicted that, oh no, this is going to be it. It's going to blow the world up in something we've never seen before. If that happens, I'll come out and say, okay, man, I really got that wrong. Promise you I will. I ain't seeing it. It looks very much like the end of, it's right on time. So, these, this, you know, these are some of the most important things that I see with this solar eclipse in Scorpio. Again, we can see our world reflected in this. I think it's quite interesting, especially the quality of the injection and the Scorpio, and this being like the tail of the stinger, or yeah, the tail of the scorpion where the stinger is, and this injection and this sort of toxin and whatnot. You know, this is very interesting and remarkable kind of thing and coincidence that we see that eclipses bring out, right? And again, you're like, well, you're kind of making the connection where it doesn't exist. No, it exists. How often do we have the world with bated breath waiting for like an injection and a needle again? And that's where you would find it, is right at the end of Scorpio, right? So pretty profound. And again, I definitely think that there's that it's going to be, again, it's going to be fraught with some strangeness and weirdness and complexity, and you know, some legitimate paranoid fears and worries because of, again, you know, people reporting symptoms after. Some people might have an allergy or other kinds of things that happen. It's going to be a mass. It's also a huge, massive undertaking where, again, you know, culture and a country and a government and all of the you know, these large systems have to move gigantic volumes of product, and people have to do it. So it's a big organizational effort as well. And again, this also relates back to things like Scorpio and power and marshaling all this energy together to get this thing done. And you know, again, it's going to be clunky for a few months, but like I said, the way I see it in 2021, by the time we get to like over the winter, especially in the northern hemisphere, and we get into Jupiter moving into Aquarius and whatnot, it'll start. We'll be past a lot of that. There will have been a lot of vaccinations and whatnot. COVID will start to feel manageable. It'll start to feel like it's somewhat in the rearview mirror, or that at least, okay, now we've gotten a handle on it. One of the biggest problems right now, though, is still the residual of all of the conspiratorial thinking about masks and all this other stuff. And I say it like that because, again, there's still a large segment in the West, especially, who act as though we don't know what we could do. What are we going to do? We only need to look at like Asian countries and the countries that really have had hardly no disruption to their culture, to their economies, to their job, to their death tolls, because they actually just got a handle on it and said, okay, quarantining, social distancing, wearing masks in public when it's necessary for a while so that we can stop the spread and get the curve down, and then open up again slowly. But then as soon as we start to see spikes, because we have good testing and good contact tracing, we can do intelligent quarantining and distancing, because we haven't done that in the US and in much of the Western world. The first wave they did. We never have done it in the US. And so now we're coming from this place where we've never gotten it under control, and now we're like, oh, we're just over this. This hysteria around something as if we have no idea what works, I think, is one of the biggest problems that we're going to deal with in the US for sure. Again, having conversations online here and there with people now, I'm just like, why do so many people act like we have no idea what to do? We can see what works. And Frank, it's draconian on some level because it's something that worked in the Dark Ages as well with bubonic plague and whatnot. But when you have something where there's no vaccination or no cure. One of the only things you can do is just not interact. And that's what this represents. And we've known that, and we've seen the countries who did that and what happened. So again, even last year, I predicted that I thought that we would do that. I thought we would do it around the globe. I said it's going to be tough for a few months, but we're going to get good testing, contact tracing, find out who has it, and learn how to intelligently quarantine. I was wrong about my prediction. I wasn't wrong about the whole world. I was definitely wrong about the US, but pretty much all of the world did it in the first wave. Europe as well, almost every country. And Asia really just nailed it and got it under control because they're used to wearing masks, mainly because of air pollution and all kinds of things. But the point is they're used to doing it. And it wasn't something where they're like, oh, I'm oppressed, the mask. They're used to doing it. And again, often because of air pollution and other factors. In the West, we weren't used to it. In the US, again. So we're right on the cusp of that right now. And this is going to be the biggest thing for the next few months, is how we're going to respond and deal with this, especially with each other. And in the midst of this election, again, this potential for crazy upheaval and potential abuses of power and where things are going right now is also a big part of it. I just want to say one more thing about what had happened with lawsuits and whatnot, because there's so much bad information. The reason all of the lawsuits kept getting thrown out, for example, people who now say, oh, you're full of crap, mail-in ballots are corrupt, mail-in ballots are this, it's all this fraud. Here's the problem with that at this point. These were laws and regulations that were passed by the states before the election. The reason the courts are throwing these grievances out, it doesn't matter what you think now. Maybe it's right. Maybe you're right. Maybe Trump is right. Maybe they're all right. That mail-in ballots are awful and you can't handle them right and we shouldn't have used them. Maybe they're right. It's irrelevant for the election that just happened because state legislatures passed these amendments and put into place the mail-in ballot criteria. By the way, I don't think it's all that stuff, but let's just say it was. You cannot come after the legislature, Republicans and Democrats. Again, you have Republican legislatures in Georgia, Pennsylvania. You cannot come after the fact and say, now we want you to invalidate all of these mail-in ballots that we agreed to months ago. Again, this is why the Republican lawsuit in Pennsylvania was thrown out by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court of the United States said, get out of here with this. You want to know why? Because you had Pennsylvania legislators suing the state, telling the state to overturn and throw out all of the mail-in ballots that they agreed to months earlier. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, what are you talking about? You can't do that. You voted for that. This was the law. You cannot come after your guy loses and say, okay, now the law is unconstitutional. Well, then why did you vote for it? It was an agreement. So this is why, even if that's true, this is why all of those lawsuits are thrown out, because you can't come after the fact and especially want a remedy like, now let's throw all the votes out. Again, courts are there for remedies. If you look at the legal language, if you've ever seen, and again, I went back and looked because I'm interested in this stuff. I think it's cool. I go back and read the legal case and what the judges actually said. And most of them are Republican judges. The Third Circuit, which is the one that oversees Pennsylvania, is one of the most conservative in the country. And they all say, what are you doing here? You know the way the law works. You agreed to these terms. You cannot come after your guy loses and says, throw all the ballots out. First of all, it has no basis. Second of all, the remedy you are seeking, which is to throw all the ballots out, is preposterous. It is not the remedy. You cannot ask for that remedy and overturn the will of all the people who sent in the ballots in good faith. So you have proof that some of them look suspicious. That's not voter fraud. That's error. And that's usually what it is. This is why every time they go to court as well, the judges will say, are you claiming fraud? Every time the lawyers say, no, Why? Because if they say yes, they are subject to sanction. This is why all of these cases are thrown out by Republicans, Republican judges, Republican circuits. The Supreme Court, Trump appointed 3 of them. It's the most conservative Supreme Court ever, and they wouldn't even look at it. They said one line, "You're asking for this?" No, declined. Because it's preposterous. So again, even if people think that it's legitimate, you cannot seek a remedy that is outrageous to correct a ordinance or a law that you already approved because you didn't get the result you wanted. It's a thinly veiled, completely, just irrational claim to go into a court. And if we had laws in this country against frivolous lawsuits, you wouldn't see any of them. We need to start having we need to have judicial, we need to have a penalty for flagrant and misuse of the courts in this country. Because so much of this is obvious. These are egregious. You don't get 50 court cases thrown out of court unless you're just clowning people. This is just clown time. Again, you have to understand, these aren't verdicts. These judges aren't saying, okay, let's now hear your case and let me see your case. And now I'm going to render a verdict that your evidence wasn't good enough to get the result you wanted. No, that's not even what's happening. They are throwing it out of court. They're saying, get out of here with this. It's like if I took you to court because you violated a contract, let's say, and I signed the contract, and now we're in court and I just didn't like the result. I just feel like I paid too much money. You're going to fix my bathroom, and I signed a contract for $250, and then afterwards, I just feel like it was too much money. So I'm going to take you to court and say, I think I should have only, paid $100. And the judge is looking at that and they're going, but you signed a contract for $250. What are you doing here? This is a contract. Well, I don't want to, I think it's wrong. The judge would throw it out of court. Throw it out of court. Get out of here. That's very different than if you go to court with a contract, $250, you paid it, they fixed the bathroom, and now you're disputing the way they fixed it, or something in it wasn't right. Then the judge listens to both sides and renders a verdict and says, okay, I find for the plaintiff, I find for the defendant, and then you maybe want to appeal that. That second scenario is not what's going on. It's the first scenario. It's, well, we did this and I don't like it, so throw them all out. Throw all the votes out now. And the courts are like, what are you people doing here? Get out of my court. This is why, again, if you read the rebukes against these lawyers, these are Republican lawyers just eviscerating Giuliani and these other lawyers. This is why you also don't have any name lawyers. Think of like Alan Dershowitz or these other peacocks that go on Fox News and Newsmax now and say all this stuff. Why aren't they in court arguing these cases? Because they don't want to get anywhere near it. Jonathan Turley is another big Republican lawyer. Also Dershowitz. Also Ken Starr, who was the special prosecutor against Clinton, and some of these other ones. Why aren't they? They would love to be able to jump in there and defend these. They would love it. They'd be all over it if they could. They're like, I ain't getting anywhere near this craziness. No way. So again, this is what's happening. And again, there's no law against coming out and just saying this stuff in the public and tweeting about it endlessly. There's no laws against it. Just say whatever you want. Post a video that looks like people are pulling ballots out of suitcases. Guess what? It was if you saw those videos, it was a shift change. And guess what? They had the mail-in ballots stored in those bins. That's where they were. So yeah, they were taking them out. Again, all this has been looked at. Oh, they got you now. Watch out. Release the Kraken. Anyway, so I'm only saying this because there's been so much of this. And so this part is done. But again, it's powerful. That eclipse on the 14th, that's the day that, bam. So when you see that, again, I'll look at it one more time, but when you see this, especially in relation to Trump's chart, this is like powerful mojo. This is some big transit. This is like kaboom. That Eclipse is right on that 4th house ruler, that debilitated 12th house ruler in the 4th. That is not a positive transit. Again, just because someone was born near an eclipse, you have to look at the whole thing. This end of the eclipse is very powerful. Why? Because we can calibrate what power is. It's called a Raja Yoga. It's the ruling planet in the 10th house, which itself is a Raja Yoga. It's the first lord in the 10th, which is a trine lord with Rahu, powerful Raja Yoga. Okay, this end has got all the power. This one, let's not forget, this man's been bankrupt how many times? He's been up and down. He's been enmeshed in scandal his whole life. Again, those who don't want to see all this or remember it, I know it. This is the debilitated moon, the debilitated 12th lord in the 4th, which also tells you, of course, a lot about his state of mind. So that's getting eclipsed. Bam. So anyway, just to sort of go back on that, but I also just wanted to kind of get, this, also just sort of talk about some of the main things with the, with what's been happening. And again, if some people want to look, if this turns into something and I'm completely wrong, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, the electoral college goes absolutely bonkers and whatnot. By the way, even if something weird happens, I just want to double down on this. You would need a lot to have to shift. You would need, and he's going to try it between now and then, to not have the electors do their constitutional duty and in keeping with the law. Even if you might have one slate of electors that gets weird, they would need to happen in like 3 or 4 states. I don't think it's going to happen in any of them, but we'll see. And again, I promise you, if I'm wrong, I'll come and say, well, I was wrong. Promise you I'll do it. Anyway, let's leave it at that. And actually, just the last thing, I do want to one more time just put this, cancel. I just want to one more time put this link to the, you want to really check out this 2021 forecast. It's really beneficial for you. Again, finding light in the darkness. The beginning of the year, again, we're dealing with quite a bit of intensity and transformation, transition, with Jupiter with Jupiter, Saturn going through Capricorn and whatnot. And this, with the things that we can expect. But then things start to really lighten up. The Mercury retrograde cycles are powerful next year. Eclipses are in the same axis, but we still have this exalted Rahu, exalted Ketu. The planets are powerful there, bringing about powerful shifts. More stability, and really showing us the way, it's supposed to be really showing us the way our world works, the way the power works. We should be learning a lot about these things right now. An opportunity to do that. Saturn is also powerful in Capricorn. So again, a lot of great things, but you want to understand it because it's intense energy. It's not like, ooh, we're going to have fun and flowers and rainbows. We're going to be working through stuff, but we'll get through it. And again, I hope to see you soon. I hope to see you on the web class. So